Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of Builders, the podcast where we explore the journeys of those who are reshaping our world through technology and innovation. In today's episode, we're thrilled to have Fredrik Stockman with us, and I'm your host, Lee. Fredrik is a CEO and co-founder of Version Lens, a co-pilot for product managers. Born out of a desire to tackle one of the most persistent challenges faced by product teams, the dreaded overhead. Before the inception of Version Lens, Fredrik worked at various companies, notably at Krea, ThreadSafe Studio, Verkes Buschen, Freebie, and more. So let's dive in and learn from Fredrik Stockman, a builder at heart whose ventures continue to pave the way for a more efficient, transparent, and innovative future. Fredrik, a warm welcome to Builders.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was big words, and I'm trying to do something of that. But yeah, thank you so much. Great to be here.
Great to have you here. I'm sure, looking at your experience, you'll live up to those warm words. But Fredrik, seriously, your work experience is one for the books. You've worked for many companies, as far as I could see, as a CTO, web developer, consultant, technical advisor. Very kind of technical roles. A lot of these, and now you're building Version Lens, which aims, as I kind of touched upon, it aims to transform how teams interact with their workloads, making innovation and the development of products core focus rather than endless like these cycles of firefighting, backlog management, and stuff like this, right? So, tell me a little bit about how you got here. Go back to the very start, prior to Version Lens, and the build up to Version Lens, basically. How did you get where you are today?
Yeah, I mean, I think it all started with something that I didn't understand at the time, but looking back, it's pretty clear that I love building experiences for other people, and to me, that could have been in many different ways or formats. In the beginning, it was pretty unclear to me whether it was going to be music or tech or something else. And I guess way back in the time, I could have been a carpenter or something like that, because I just love building things that people appreciate using or experiencing. Then when it was about music, I wasn't a huge success in terms of managing to put food on my table. So I was more successful in terms of that when it came to building digital products. I got the exact same excitement. I really love when people are listening to a song or experiencing a product that I've built, been part of building. It doesn't be me alone. And then that journey started when I was a kid. Pretty much a lot of developers, I guess, realized they like the geeky stuff when they're in their teenage years. I did that. And then when I left high school, I started coding as a job. And since 13 years back, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt. When did you start coding?
I remember I got a book about C++ from my grandfather when I was 11 or 12. I didn't really know English at the time, so I felt that was the biggest barrier. Once I learned some English, right, I felt that the coding was the barrier. And C++ is maybe not, looking back, the most friendly programming language to start with. But once you get a bit of hold of that, then you have broken a few barriers to learn other languages like Python, Java, and JavaScript, and so on. But yeah, then I was a big fan of very geeky stuff like reverse engineering and so those kind of things. But then when I was getting a little bit older, I started with web development, and older in this case means 16, 17 years old. Then I felt like I had a big desire to build some things from scratch, because that's where you really can get that experience or build that experience for others. Yeah. So to prove that, I got a job at Nokia to prove that this is maybe not for me, which is a weird way to look at it. But right. I really loved that job because the boss that I had, Thomas, was a fantastic boss, such a role model, and he excited me every day. So I realized, looking back, that it's not only about the experience the experience others have. My experience as a developer has to be very good too, or a product builder for that matter. And looking forward, like when we started building companies ourselves, which was now I think 13 years back, me and Pascal have actually started companies ever since together.
Is Pascal co-founder? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So the first company we founded was an app, and that was around the time when people looked for apps to download, and that's obviously not the case anymore. So we
Mm.
built an app that gave people free stuff in terms of small drinks and chocolate bars or whatever, like things that people could try out for free.
Yeah.
Instead of paying with money, they answered 10 questions in the app, and to get another item, they had to answer these questions. So
And
we
what?
were essentially a marketing, or say marketing research tool for FMCG companies
Got you.
like
Got you.
Procter and Gamble. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. So you were after, the answers to those questions, that data, essentially. Yeah. A
yeah, exactly,
give and
exactly,
take relationship, and who doesn't want free stuff, right?
exactly. And like what we learned before that was that you can never change people's behaviors.
Mm,
When it comes to free stuff, you can. Like that's
mm,
our learning from that. Like
mm.
people start acting irrationally completely when they get free stuff. We
Yeah.
tried handing out these products for a few cents, like a really small amount of money, and then people started acting what you could call rationally,
Mm,
which was super interesting.
mm.
Um, but then moving forward, like I said, I really loved building products, and I did that together with Pascal. We moved on building some software for the Swedish healthcare, and then we went back into the startup scene, you could say. So every second time we built our company on our own
Mm.
with some other people, and every second time we did it for someone else. So that was
Okay.
around the time when it was much easier to raise money. So that pitch we had was basically, okay, you can raise money, we can build the product, let's do it together.
Right. Right. Right.
Um, so we did that a few times, and then we realized that there was a really big problem when it comes to there is still a very very big problem when it comes to building products, and that is the overhead, especially when you start to grow, the frustration from people not understanding what the product team is doing.
Hmm.
And there are loads of problems that we felt should be addressed in a better way.
Hmm.
um, and that's basically the reason we started Versionless, because we felt like it's fantastic to build product, but the way people do it is very suboptimal, and we
Hmm.
want to be a part of making that process a lot more efficient and reduce the overhead. And
Hmm.
the core person in a product company is the product manager, that's
Right.
bridging essentially business and product.
Yep. Yep. Nice. And in these, before Virgin Lens, in these companies that
Mm,
you were building, and you mentioned building software for the for Swedish healthcare.
yeah.
What was the software you were building for the Swedish healthcare? And
Yeah.
were you then part of a product team? Were you developing there? Did you have a product manager that was essentially feeding you tickets?
Yeah, you could
And
definitely say that.
basically all
Like,
of this kind of laid the foundation, I would assume, for Version Lens
it
and what you've
very
built
much
from it.
did. And we realized, even in a large project like building a new journal system for the Swedish healthcare system,
Mhm.
down to the very small products, when you're just 2 3 people in the beginning of a product, you have similar issues
Mhm.
about really being able to focus on what's actually valuable
Yep.
for the end consumer or a patient in a Swedish healthcare
Mhm.
case. So that case, when it comes to the Swedish healthcare, we were part of building a new aggregated journal system. We did the front end for that, the first version, and some other people did a back end, and we were obviously part of a larger initiative.
Mhm.
So Pascal and I did the front end of that, and that tool was essentially a way for, is still actually in production, is a way for medical staff to look at all your journals independently or where the data is actually stored, so they don't have to look in 10 different journal systems. They can actually look at one instead, which obviously increases the efficiency and the quality of the care that you get as a patient a lot. And I'm
Mhm.
happy it's still in use. We were part of that product development and launched it together with a company called Kurus. And the product manager and the tech manager, you could all call that person, is Fredrik Enriquez, still like one of the, if not the best person in terms of that role that I've ever met. I don't know how he managed all that. Like, I could never do that. And I think most product managers simply feel that they lack time and lack insights on what's going on, and they can simply not stand on top of all the data that's existing in the ticket management system and conversations and meetings and so on. It's just too much data.
Yeah. And then, maybe take us a little bit deeper into version lens. Let's tell me a little bit about your users, or your kind of typical users, who they are, how they use the product, and essentially how does the product work?
Yeah. So we target product managers, and a confusing thing may be that product manager is called a different thing in different companies. Some call them
Mm,
engineering managers, and some call
mm,
them producers, and so on.
mm,
But what we mean by product manager is the person that sets the goal, essentially the strategy for the product team, and then also carries out the execution, like make sure that the developers and designers and testers are actually focused on that target and running in a good speed in the right direction.
mhm.
So that's who we are targeting, and what we're trying to do. You could categorize their work simply into two categories. One is the strategic part, which is making sure that you decide to build the right thing, and the other part is actually carrying out what you decided to build.
Mhm.
And about 40% of every product manager's or the average product manager's time is spent on firefighting, which
Right.
is essentially just a reaction to what's come up just recently, and you realize that you have to
Mhm.
do something ad hoc. And almost
Mhm.
half of their time is spent on doing that, which we felt, I mean, we felt firsthand, but also like realizing that we're not unique.
Mm.
It's a global thing. This has to be fixed, and that's pushed us in the direction to help them with the execution phase of their
Mhm.
job, meaning that making sure that the developers, designers, testers are running at a good speed in the right direction.
Mhm.
What we do practically is three
Mm.
things. One is making sure that the data that you collect from your team is clean, has high quality, and we're doing that in terms of having a bot that collects the information and asks a few follow-up questions in Slack where people mention these things, and then we store the information about what people have in terms of ideas,
Mhm.
and
So
then
is
we
this
visualize. Yeah.
apologies for interrupting as well. I
No.
think it's just
Yeah.
this bot that is collecting this information, or this
Mm,
data. This is like a bot. It's like a plugin in Slack, or is it also
exactly. Exactly.
compatible in other communication channels, or is it kind of
Yeah. No.
something that you fully rely on Slack for?
We rely on Slack, Teams, or Discord for that.
Okay.
So Teams and Slack are by far the biggest ones.
Mm,
But what we realized is that we need, or any AI tool for that matter, generally speaking, has to be where the user is, and only
yeah.
let bother the person, the user, when it actually makes sense. So we're completely silent if we think that your product team is doing fantastic. But
Hmm.
if we see that, oh, this is some input that actually could benefit from some clarification, then our bot reaches out in the thread in Slack or Teams or Discord saying like, okay, here's the question for that. Could you clarify this, please? And then we add that
Mm,
to the ticket. And
okay.
then when we collect all this data, we can visualize it. So we have one customer who has 120 Slack channels, and they simply cannot get an overview what's going on and all the feedback that's coming in.
Hmm.
So we don't only collect the input, but we actually visualize it and categorize it so you can act on it.
Hmm.
So that's one part of the product. The other parts are very similar, I would say, but instead of collecting input, we're making sure that we read the data sources we have access to, like Jira, Trello, or some other sources, but actually other sources like Slack or Calendar as
Mm,
well, and
mm,
then let the product manager or developer know about things that we see as potential issues,
mhm,
such as that if it's very important for you to do tasks that are very business relevant,
mhm,
then we let the developer know that, okay, this task that you just started doing may not be aligned with the business objectives that your managers or yourself has set, and that
super interesting.
makes, yeah, so
So
it's a
these
way to kind of
objectives.
align you. Yeah.
Got you. Sorry to interrupt again. But these objectives, these like essentially kind of company OKRs, you could say. These are
Exactly.
this is information that you have access to as well, and then you can basically highlight or warn the product manager that something that's being worked on might not be completely aligned with that objective, or
Correct.
that they're not working towards achieving that kind of key result. That's super interesting. Um,
Exactly. So if you simplify productivity, at least for a development team or a product team, you could say that it's a function of speed and accuracy or focus. And that part is about focus, but the other aspect is also then speed. So we're trying to alert developers or product managers when we see, for example, a ticket that seems to be going on for a long time. And that could be a sign of that the developers has run into a rabbit hole. Like one task evolves into 10 different tasks, and then it just keeps on growing. And then maybe all you need is just like one question, like, do you think that this is a potential rabbit hole, or and then maybe you want to kind of expand the task or basically split it up into multiple tasks, or do you think it's better to kind of switch focus to another task? And when we look at data and from the 250 product managers that we have talked to, a lot of time is spent on a few tasks. So you could have the 20-80 rule, like 80% of the time is spent on 20% of the task, when it actually doesn't have to be like that. So we're trying to identify the tasks that tend to take a long time, and then just ask a question like, is this the right thing to do now, or should we not do it or split it up, or how should we do it? And the reality instead, how people work, is that they just react on it after a week or two, realize like, okay, we actually spent a lot of time on implementing what we thought was a small feature, but it ended up taking 2 weeks. And then what we can do is predict that a little bit, saying like, okay, we see signs of that this is a thing that could be growing for forever, essentially.
Right.
And the last thing we're doing in terms of our product is giving you insights. So you could say that if you have a monitoring tool, if you've ever used a tool like, say, an analytics tool for marketing or user behavior or something like that, and that's a great way to understand your users. But there aren't any really good tool to understand your product team, and that's exactly what we want to do when it comes to product teams. So we want to build, or we have a tool that essentially visualizes, okay, out of the OKRs of business objectives that we've decided on, how much time are we spending on each one, and potentially things that are outside of these, and maybe dividing the things that are outside of the objectives, dividing that up into which type of tasks are we spending a lot of time on, and then you can identify very interesting things that you can learn from and act on, such as we have a technical debt in this part of the product that then consumes a lot of time that's not relevant to the business objectives. And you can also split it up on different parameters, like, okay, let's see what every team member in my team is working on, and you can easily identify knowledge silos and then potential expertises and so on. So breaking up the data and make it visual and easy to act on in terms of what the team does, not only what your users does. We think is extremely important to basically have as a decision framework or a foundation for your decisions on how you should work efficiently in your team. Because you do the same for your users, but for some reason you don't do the same for your team. We think that's broken. And just like for users, if you see some anomalies, then you probably want to send an alert. And that's what I talked about before. We send alerts when we see anomalies too, but about your team rather than your users.
It's super interesting. And as far as I can gather, then it's essentially this, to use a term, kind of co-pilot, right, for product managers. Is that how you're marketing it as well?
Yeah, even though I'm personally like, I think co-pilot is such like commonly used that it's a little too vague. So it's a good word, even though it's pretty undescriptive. I'd just say like, make sure that your execution of your product is as good as possible, and we're going to do whatever makes sense in that area.
That focus and enabler, I think a lot of companies can kind of benefit from that. Proxify as well. I think I will be I'll be sharing the the links with our product managers. I think it's a really actually important interesting point. But I'm a little bit interested in terms of you spoke about these connections with Jira, for example. We're using Jira ourselves, and that's where we have the majority of our kind of product boards for the different products that we're building and maintaining. So let's say that I, for example, am a product manager and I'm talking with my team, and your tool then kind of picks up on the fact that something might not be completely clear, or basically it can help me in creating a ticket in Jira, or does it enrich an already created ticket in Jira, or how does the process work there?
No, it's a really, really good question. So we do both of those, I would say. So if we see a message in any channel that we have access to, we are trying to understand the intention of it.
Mm,
And if the intention is to give feedback about on the product, then that's a thing that we are experts on, and we then as the next step are trying to figure out how can we help out in the best way here. And
mm,
it's not always creating a new ticket, because if there is a similar ticket to what you're giving feedback on, maybe, as you said, the right thing is to give a comment on it rather than
right.
creating a new one, which is essentially a duplicate. So
Mm,
the next thing we're doing is semantically searching the ticket database or the task management system that you have for similar tickets about what we're just talking about. If
mm,
there is one, then we're suggesting you adding a comment, but we only do that if we understand, if we think that the comment has somewhat a high value.
mm,
And we basically, and we set the threshold pretty generously. So if you have a comment and it seems pretty clear what you're having in terms of a comment, then we let you add that as a comment. Otherwise, we just ask you a follow-up question on, okay, you say that it doesn't seem like anything is working, then we may ask you to elaborate what specifically is not working where. And then you
got
answer
you.
that, and then you add that as a comment. But if that ticket doesn't exist, then we just add it as a new ticket if you
Mhm.
want. But it's always up to the user to explicitly take the action to save it or comment.
Got you. Got you. And then also kind of the moving of tickets, kind of resolving tickets as well. Is all of that kind of actionable through version lens as well?
No, Evan, we're not solving any task, and I'm not sure that
Right.
was what you meant. But it's interesting you asked that, because the one origin for the entire idea that we had was that we thought of, like, what is actually needed to solve a task,
Mm,
and then obviously need very clear information, or at least somewhat clear information, so there is no misunderstanding between the author and the actual executor of the
mm,
task.
mm,
So that's where we felt where we had to start, and then to actually make sure that you move in a good pace, then you need observability and insights and alerts and so on. So
mm.
we are focusing entirely on the product manager, who's not typically the person that carries out the task, but actually
Right.
manages everything around it.
Yes. Yeah. That makes sense. Um, and I'm also interested. You were talking about the like visualizing, this data on tickets that product managers have been
Mm,
working on, whether they've been, truly uh, working towards the company's objectives, key results, and
mm.
everything. Are these like additional features in your product, or how does the kind of let's say the pricing model at Version Lens? What's the business model like? Are these kind of are all of these in one product, or do you kind of pay for additional features, or how does that work?
Yeah, so you could categorize the product into clarifying input
Hmm.
and visualizing that. That's one feature you can pay separately for. And the other two, which is insights and alerts, we bundle them into one product, which is additional to the input. So if you want to pay for just use the input aspect of it, then you can do that. But then we have a separate price for the insights and alerts. But the normal flow is basically, in terms of customer journey, I would say, is like trying out the input aspect of it. We
Hmm.
visualize what the input is on a
Hmm.
weekly basis and a sprint basis. Then it makes sense to kind of unlock the rest of the insights.
Hmm.
And then once you unlock the rest of the insights and understand more on a bigger picture what we're actually spending time on, then you may want to avoid the anomalies or the unwanted insights that you have, such as we're
Hmm.
spending 40% of our time firefighting. Okay,
Yeah.
let's send an alert when we reach 10%,
Hmm.
so we potentially can take an action earlier.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of typical journey for a customer.
Hmm. Yeah, I think I find this really really interesting, because there's one thing that we talk a lot about internally here, and that's this kind of trying to keep this like laser focus towards
Mm,
working on things that have the biggest impact, and that's kind of work, have the biggest
yeah.
impact on these objectives and key results. The main reason why companies set them in the first place, right? So I think
Mm,
the fact that you have a product that really enables teams to keep that focus, or kind of alert if you're off course or off track, I think is super interesting. How old is Version Lens? When was it founded?
We founded soon 2 years ago, and for the first 9-10 months, we actually built another product. The entire idea was that we wanted to do as much positive impact as possible for as many product developers that we could.
Right.
And the first thing that came, not the first thing that came to our mind, but the first thing we built was an infrastructure related product. And even just listening to the word infrastructure, I think we lose, I don't know, 80% of every listener in terms of interest and so on. We were a little like, I don't know, naive in that sense. We felt that that is the biggest problem. We built that, we launched it, we managed to get some customers, but we didn't manage to kind of get a broad attention and an understanding for the problem. So then we felt like, okay, where's the big problem? That is around the product manager, who actually has 122 roles, according to a researcher that we collaborate with, Fredrik Stockman. So he breaks down the product manager role into 122 roles that they have, which is insane. And if you, on top of that, add all the data that the product managers should be on top of, such as the tickets that are constantly changing, a comment comes in every, I don't know, hour or so, and some message on Slack and calendar, and someone is sick and so on. It is, I would argue, not an impossible job, but it's close to impossible to do it really well. So there is a huge need for a tool that helps you with all that. And that's when we felt like, okay, Pascal and I built a lot of product companies ourselves. We need to team up with someone who's insanely good commercially. And that's when we got in touch with our third co-founder, Pontus, who we have worked with for about a year now. So I would say the real founding of this company is about 1 year old, and we launched the first product this fall, or say last fall.
Fantastic. And you're a Swedish company. Are all of you co-founders based in Sweden? How many employees are there working in the company at the moment?
So exactly. We're 3 Swedish co-founders, and we're 7 in the team. One is sitting in Amsterdam, one in Prague, and the remaining people are sitting here in Stockholm. So you could argue like a hybrid company, and that adds to, and that is, I guess, a pretty normal setup these days after COVID, especially. But it also adds a bit of complexity for us and the customers, because if everyone is sitting around the same table, you can grow kind of the understanding what everyone is doing and why are we doing, what's the objectives, and so on. You can align super quickly, but it starts to get harder when you're not in the same room, I would argue.
Yeah, and being 7, I'm not assuming like all 7. You mentioned Pontus is working on the commercial side. What are the other 6 positions? How many are working in with building the product? From what I can gather, yourself, Pascal, have been building a lot of it yourselves. Are there any other developers or designers in the team? Or
yeah, exactly. So I mean, you're spot on in terms of what the roles we have. Like at this point, it's all about either building or selling, and everything else is, to some, if you want to generalize it, is not the right thing to do when you don't know which product the market really, really needs. So we are, you could say, 4.5 people building the product. If you say that I'm spending half my time on building and half my time on selling, or basically understanding what we should build. Then Pontus, exactly. Pontus and Diogo are my you could colleagues on the commercial side. So 2.5 on commercial and 4.5 on building.
Nice. What's your stack? What are you using? Obviously, I'd assume you're using your own product. Are you using Jira as the product management software? And what stack are you building the product in?
Yeah, I'm in terms of task management system, I'm a huge fan of both the kind of opinions and the culture and the product around Linear, which is a Finnish company that was, I don't know if they were part of Y Combinator, but at least they are of grounded in Silicon Valley. So anyone interested in product development should check out their blog, I think. They have a bunch of really good blog posts. We like their tool a lot. They have a lot of opinions that we align with. But still, I'm a really big fan of the customizations that you can do in Azure DevOps, Jira, ClickUp, and other tools. But we don't use that tool more than understanding how we can work with them. Then the rest of the stack, in terms of product, it's Slack, like many others, Notion in terms of documentation. Anyone interested in tech, we are Python and JavaScript based, some Go. And I think there's a preconception that if you're doing this semantic graph that we're essentially doing, then you need a graph database. We may need that in the future, but the iteration speed is key to us. So we actually use a traditional Postgres relational database.
Okay.
And then you can essentially use that in a way that is very, very graph-like. That helps us being extremely efficient, and the iteration speed improves a lot. But when we grow and understand what type of problems we really need to double down on, then we may want to move into a graph database. But I think a lot of companies are prematurely optimizing the kind of graph aspect and having a vector database when actually Postgres has a very kind of convenient way to support for vectors and so on.
And in terms of your the competitive landscape for version lens, do you, obviously you were saying around maybe a year into your journey properly, if you consider you pivoted after 9-10 months. What does the competitive landscape look like for version lens? Are there any kind of more long-term players? It seems like it's still quite an innovative idea, given the it's the same with these kind of Copilot tools for developers as well. And this being specific for product management it seems like a fairly innovative idea. I'm just interested to get your take on the competition out there and hurdles that you've faced so far and that you're trying to overcome at the moment.
Yeah, so essentially, there are a bunch of tools for developers and designers, speaking of the product team, and testers as well, I would argue. And when it comes to people outside the product team, sales, HR, marketing, and so on, there's a ton of tools there as well. But for the actual manager of the product team, there's a limited amount of help, I would say. You probably have Jira or something similar, and then have some documentation tool, and that's more or less about it. Even though they have this insane amount of roles, 122 roles, and such a big data set to constantly be on top of. So we felt that...
What are these? Sorry to interrupt. What are these 122 roles? I'm not asking you to list all 122, but I'm a little bit interested in the research that you said you're
exactly. So we've partnered with really good, one of the actual few researchers entirely focused on product managers. There's a lot of research on project management or product management, but product managers as a role, there's limited research, even though that's a very central role. So we partnered up with Fredrik Stockman, who's a Belgian researcher on the topic product managers. He basically looked at all the science, or a lot of the science that exists on product managers, and categorized their work into whatever number the science says that they have in terms of roles. And he found that there are 122 roles or tasks that they have, about 30 categories, you could say, and then 6 main topics that they have to do things in. And that ranges from everything from, obviously, the operational aspect that we're doing, to legal thing, to marketing, to research. There's a bunch of things around the product managers that normally you would think, at least when I wasn't when I hadn't done a lot of product management myself, I thought that there must be someone else doing this. But a lot of the kind of tasks that are around the product development comes to, or ends up on, the product manager's table. So they need to be a multi-expert, and that's really hard to be. So they need to be good at legal, recruitment, the operational planning, and a million different things. So I can send you a link afterwards and let you know. It's super interesting. It's actually crazy. I just had an exercise before we actually partnered up with Fredrik, and then I just use my finger to like randomly pick one task and see like, okay, does this actually make sense that a product manager has to do? Then every time, yeah, sure. And then I read the entire list, like, yeah, every single one makes sense that a product manager has to do.
Wearing many, many hats.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's look forward just a little bit. I mean, I know in the very early days it can be hard to look too far ahead. You're kind of busy building, of course. But what are your main goals at the moment for Version Lens? What are you working on right now?
Yeah, no, I think the most important for most product companies in the beginning is being extremely good at solving one important problem. And that is what we're focused on right now. The thing that I'm most excited about now that we're rolling out to our early access program customers is the alerts. And we're seeing now that these alerts give them information about things that they wouldn't have realized until afterwards otherwise. And that is extremely exciting. Then what we do practically is making sure that a few alerts are extremely good rather than being somewhat good at 10 or 20. Obviously, in the long run, I'm speaking a few months in our long run time, we can increase the array of alerts that we can give customers. But we want to make sure that we give you highly relevant alerts that are actionable by you.
And what might a typical alert be?
Yeah, so one could be that we have been given the OKRs or objectives, business objectives that you have. And we can see, for example, one that we sent out a week or two ago that we got a customer to actually call us and tell us about afterwards was like they were actually they had a developer working on a dark theme task that was not really business valuable, but we made sure that we reached out to the developer asking for clarification on the business objectives, how it's connected to the business objectives, and they could, in this case, reprioritize and do something else. And obviously, that's something that in this case would have happened otherwise after the execution of the task, or at least later. So in this case, we saved them a lot of focus and saved a lot of time, I would say. Another alert that we are really good at sending out is understanding if a task is taking a long time, longer than we feel that is expected. So we try to analyze every task and see what is an expected ETA or estimated time of arrival for this task. And if we feel that you're running over that estimated time a little bit, then we just reach out to developers saying that, okay, is this potentially a rabbit hole, or do you think you should split it up, or is there anything we should know? So just like a junior PM would do, like asking the developer, what do you think about this? We get the information back and then relay that to the PM if we think that's necessary.
It's a bit interesting because I know a lot of people. I think I speak for myself as well. You're a way into a task and you've committed that time, so you're like, oh well, I have to finish it now, Whereas if you're alerting them to the fact that you might be going down a rabbit hole that you don't want to go any further, maybe it's a good idea to step back and actually reassess.
Yeah. And quite often you're like, oh, I'm okay with this not being super relevant for the business objectives because I want to keep the motivation high for the developer. But then maybe you thought it was going to take a few hours and it takes up to a week. Then somewhere along the way, we're just reminding you politely and nicely, like, is this what you think you should be doing right now? And then it's a surprising thing that we've realized is that a bunch of users of this actually appreciates that it's a system reaching out rather than a human who's nagging you like, okay, here you're like doing something that may not be business relevant. But in our case, we're just reaching out to you, sharing how we reasoned about it, what the kind of, the sources for our alert. And then they can take whatever action they want on that. So I think there's a value in this case to be less human, and the humans can be kind of the nice cop or good cop in that sense.
Yeah, true. And you spoke about in previous companies to Version Lens. You mentioned raising money in the past and stuff like. Is this on the horizon for Version Lens? Maybe you already have in the past. Is this? What about
Yeah,
funding? Is this going to be an enabler for Version Lens growth in the future, or?
definitely. So we were lucky to raise money in December from People Ventures, who's a
Okay.
Danish VC that I mean, from a business perspective, fell in love with. Like, they're really living up to the world of being people centric, which
Mm,
we think is super super important. Then we
mm,
got Curiosity VC, a Dutch VC that joined. We felt the same with, and a third one called Pitch Drive, who's a Belgian VC. So we're
nice.
really lucky to get some investors on board that we felt on a human level shared our values, and then from there want to grow a really really good business.
Mm,
But we did that only in December, which is quite recent.
mm,
And as you said, we've been around for 1 or 2 years, and we are also really happy that we didn't raise money before that, because we were discovering really what we should build, and
yeah.
only after really understanding what the true problem is,
Yeah.
then we felt like we should raise money, which is when we realized that product managers should be the focus for us.
Mm. So you kind of you were kind of at that stage where you'd built your let's say your proof of concept, and you were ready to um, look to get those investors in. You essentially got three different investors in at the same
Mm.
time, then, right?
Yes, exactly.
And was that always the goal, to get in three, or to get in more than one, because you wanted diverse perspectives, or why three at the same time?
Yeah, so we wanted two or three.
Mm,
So the first one we managed to get to know and fall in love with was People Ventures. That they took lead on it. Then we wanted one more, and the reason for us is that we wanted someone who's very very focused on AI.
mhm,
And Curiosity is only doing investments in the AI, generative AI space. I'm not sure if it's only generative AI, at least AI.
yeah, yeah,
So they have a lot of portfolio companies that we can share our learnings from and learn a lot from, because this space is super young, and we need to. There are no really best practices, but a
mm,
lot of learnings that people have, and we
mm,
already benefited from that. And the third potential add-on, we felt like, okay, if there's a VC that can give us access to a really, really good network on
mm,
top of the really good network we get from People Ventures and Curiosity, then
mm,
we're excited about that. And Pitch Drive, the Belgian VC, has a really good network, both in terms of portfolio companies, but also a very hands-on approach to their portfolio companies. So if I want to talk about anything about sales, product development, or building, I have essentially three VCs that are really reaching out their arms all the time, and I
mm,
have to learn that, like, because my experience is that the access to these people is good, but also they have a lot of things to do. But I've never felt that these people are, or NFL ever felt really before, that they're so accessible as they are right now, which I'm
mm,
deeply appreciating. So
mm,
that's why we felt like, okay, we can get a fantastic network, really good domain insights into the generative AI space, and
yeah,
also specific domain knowledge. So that's just
mm,
fantastic for us. And also, kind of a side effect of it is that, I mean, obviously, we believe a lot in our own company, but
yeah,
we want some validation from others who have a
mm,
structural way to see to evaluate us.
mm,
And all these three VCs had a pretty extensive way to look at us, and we felt like, okay, then it's not only us, and we got some interest from more VCs than that, which we're happy with. Then, I mean, the assumptions we're doing, we don't know if they're right until we actually manage to reach a ton of PMs and do that
mhm,
incredibly well. But the
mhm.
indications are very good, given that we believe in it, and a bunch of other VCs too.
Fantastic. And
Hmm.
how many how many users do you have, in terms of how many PMs are using the tool today?
Yeah, so one important, connecting to the previous question, one important thing for us was to reach out to many product people, including PMs,
Mhm,
developers, designers, and so on. So until today, we have learned and talked to about 250 product managers about the product that we have and learn from their experiences. I can't just share you any exact numbers on the number of customers we have, but I would honestly, even though I felt strongly, obviously, that this is a big problem, I'm surprised by how seldomly anyone says that this is actually not really a problem for us. It's happened once or
Right.
twice out of the, say, 100 conversations that I've had with product managers. And then you could also like categorize it to, I mean, a typical term for young companies in getting investment is you're talking about the ideal customer profile. And when I'm saying that I rarely hear about anyone not having these problems, that's when I talk to the ideal customer profile, which for us is a company between 10 and 100 employees. Fewer than 10, you tend to be pretty well aligned just by talking.
Exactly.
But as you get more than 10 people, the problem really, really scales. And yeah, I mean, adding developers could almost feel like nothing is happening to some extent. So visualizing that is really important.
Exactly. I think the bigger the company, the more likely the engineering team or the R&D department is going to be. The messier or harder it can be to kind of keep that laser focus, at least. But you started mentioning a little bit on the topic of AI earlier. I was just interested how you kind of envision version lens evolving over the next 5 years. I can assume there's going to be a lot of thought given to AI over the next few years. Can you talk to us a little bit about I'm not saying you kind of look too far in the future, but if you were to kind of sit here and maybe look at the next few years.
Yeah. So I think looking at us now, we are a tool that let you know the right thing at the right time. But we only do it for things that we are confident that we're really good at. So looking in the near future, we're going to let you know, give you the right data at the right time for more things than we do today. And then if you zoom out a little bit more, then what happens when you more or less always have access to the right data at the right time as a product manager, then we do become, you could say, more or less as a second brain, a second product brain in your product team. And that's where I think we're going to be, what we're going to be seen as in a year or two. It's going to be very hard to say in a 5 years time, but in 1 or 2 years, I think we're going to be seen as like, if there is anything important we should know, Versionless is going to let us know in terms of product development. And for people outside the product team, I think they're going to be seeing us as an incredible way to get transparency into the product team. What's going on? How can we learn from that? How can we make better decisions so we don't come up with ideas that are just unrealistic that we could carry out, so we can focus on the things that we actually benefit from the best. So I think we're going to talk about people using Versionless are going to be talking about us a lot more rather than today. It's a lot about us and them, like us developers and product people and them as business people and vice versa. And I think that's just very sad. But in the future, I think we're going to help with like basically getting product and business into one team.
And how do you see the role of the product manager today evolving? Particularly given the advances we're seeing in terms of AI. Let's say that on a very, very general level, if depending who you believe, what you read, or what you listen to, let's say that people are talking about co-pilots or becoming pilots, essentially writing the majority of code that today's developers are going to be basically accepting or not accepting, right? How do you see the role of the product manager in the future in this regard? How do you think AI is going to impact that?
Yeah, I think that's a super interesting question. And I think in the short term, we're going to be seeing the amount of firefighting going down from 40%, which is the average right now for product managers, to something significantly lower. And that's what we're addressing right now. Looking even further, as you say, like you're going to have AI developers, the velocity of what you can build is going to go up. And then with velocity, there's a need for kind of a command center, command and control center which is very, very good at choosing the right AI developer for the right job and orchestrating everything. And that's what I think we will be doing as a company in maybe 5 years' time, where AI developers will be more capable and solving at least the low-hanging fruit, but maybe even more than that in 5 years' time. But with higher velocity, you need more control, essentially, because unless you want to add more people to it, which I don't think you want to. So we're going to be that command and control center. Someone else will build the AI developer.
Super interesting. I think, I think the product is really interesting, given like the advances that are being made in the AI sphere at the moment. I think you're in a very interesting position to kind of take advantage of that here and now as well. But the one question I also have is regarding one particular feature. I know obviously you're still kind of in the early days, you could say, but is there one feature of version lens that you wish that your existing users knew about or knew more about? If so, this is your time to tell them.
No, I mean, I think what we're rolling out right now, which more customers will see, we give access to it to a limited number of customers right now, and that is alerts. Why we're rolling it out carefully right now is to make sure that we send fantastic alerts before we're letting more and more companies into that feature. And those alerts do give you insights about things that you would have realized afterwards rather than proactively. And I'm really feeling that, because we are obviously sending those alerts internally, and I feel that I'm on top of the product team, which is a false sense of security from my side, because I do get alerts daily that actually give me insights about things that I would otherwise have realized afterwards. So when I get an alert, which I did before lunch today, about a thing, I felt like, okay, I simply wouldn't have been able to figure this out until afterwards, unless this tireless junior PM or co-pilot that we're building just crunched all the data and predicted something. And that is, I think, something that is incredibly exciting. Like, it's a carefully crafted alert that we only send if we think that this is highly relevant for you. So I simply can't wait to see more users using that, because I think it's going to be seen as not having a fire alarm at home. Like, sure, you may be at home and realize that there is a fire and you could put out the fire yourself. But the way to avoid that is by being home constantly and being awake all the time, which is not maybe what you want to prioritize. We will let you know before the fire happens.
Super interesting. I'm also interested in like just a quick take on any feedback that you guys are receiving from your existing users. Is there any kind of really unexpected feedback that you've received that that you just really did not expect to receive it?
To some extent, yes. I would say one thing that I thought would maybe be I thought of it briefly, and then was surprised when it actually was true, was that developers because what we do in these alerts is, if it makes sense for us and we have the permission from the PM, we send a message to the developer or designer first and ask them for kind of complementary information, which I would appreciate if my junior PM did it too. And what we didn't know before was whether these developers and designers would feel that this is a potential issue for them, where someone is like nagging them or whatever. But since these alerts are only been sent when we feel that this is highly relevant, these developers most of the developers that we've asked have said that they actually prefer a system, a non-person, non-human sending these alerts or questions. Because it's well grounded. We share them the information why we send this question to them, and it's just basically a system asks you why, and it gives you a potential solution to it, and then that is something that's, at least from my perspective, surprisingly appreciated. So yeah, that's pretty exciting to see, I think.
Maybe the fact that it's coming from a system makes it easier to trust. I don't know. Assuming that system is,
Yeah, I mean, we
it's
don't
grounded
send
on
it
data.
from exactly. I mean, we don't send it from anything else than we think that this will help you if you act on it. And then you can just let us know if you don't like this type of alert or message, then we'll start sending it less. We will basically not send it at all in the future
Right.
if you think this is irrelevant. So
So the
the
users have
feedback
that
loop
kind
is
of
really
option
important.
to kind of tailor or kind of customize the alerts they're getting and how the product, how Version Lens works for them.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. Because I do get a lot of alerts from other systems that I simply don't look at because I
Mm.
get them too often. And maybe they're relevant 1 out of 5 times, and I should read every one of them. But I get some, uptime alerts from systems that don't really matter, and then I'm like, okay, I should probably configure that, but they don't have an easy way to get my feedback on it and fine tune it. But
Mm.
basically, what we can do is just, do you think this was relevant or helpful? Yes or
Yes.
no. If you think so, then we'll improve or work more on that. If
Mm.
you don't think so, then we're gonna send less of that. If you don't even give us any information, we'll basically send an alert a few times and then stop sending it, because no answer equals after a few times equals no to us. We don't want to
Mhm.
nag you about things that you don't even act on.
Right. Makes sense.
Hmm.
Fantastic, Fredrik. I think before we wrap up, is there anything else that you want to add? Anything that you want our listeners to know about?
No, I mean, I think it's an extremely exciting space we're in when it comes to generative AI. And if
Mm.
anyone wants to learn more about it, don't hesitate to reach out to me.
Mhm.
I'm in love with product development and what we do, and don't hesitate.
Mm. Fantastic. Well, thank you very, very much, Fredrik, for joining us today. And I hope for our listeners, this has sparked your imagination, inspired you on what might be your own journey in building your own tech product. Um, Thanks again, Fredrik, for joining us today. Really,
Yeah, thank
really
you.
interesting talk, inspirational. Keep up the good work. Good luck with everything to you and the rest of the company. And
Yeah, likewise.
for all our listeners, thanks for joining us, and keep on keeping it on.